Hi everyone, Haze here again, and today we will be working on the complete tutorial. So I will actually split this tutorial into 3 days because there's a lot of content to cover. And if you have never followed any Impasto tutorials up until now, you can actually just watch this series because I will actually cover everything again, from base painting to coloring it, and then also the Impasto effects that we're going to lay down. So it's going to be 3 days in total, and today we are going to work on the base painting. So today we are actually working on a landscape painting. So landscape paintings are one of the hardest subject matter to tackle because there's a lot of textures involved and there's a lot of modeling and colors as well. It's like the hardest of the hardest. So basically, I was inspired by autumn colors like this piece here. But if you see here, everything is like everywhere. So the colors are all jumbled up. So we have to kind of like simplify it a little bit. So the first thing we want to do is to simplify the colors. And then the next thing we want to do is to introduce more depth. For example, these are all just considered like background. So in order to introduce depth to the painting, we need to actually introduce like midground, foreground, and background. So this would be the background, and then the midground should connect here, and then the foreground should be here. So something like that, and then this will remain in the background with some of the big trees going to stay in the middle ground. So this is the background, and then here we'll have some leaves. And here we have some leaves as well, and then the water kind of like just travel here. So if you think that when people do plein air painting in the wilds, in the nature, and they paint the landscape exactly as how they see it, majority of the time there's some tweaking involved in the composition because you can't get a perfect composition like every time. So this is how they do it. They actually adjust the composition to make it better. So once you open the file, you will see something like this. This is actually the complete painting. So I simplified majority of the painting. I mostly just retain the trees, and then everything else is from imagination. So today is going to be quite fun. What you can do is, if you find a landscape picture, maybe you can just refer to it exactly. Or the second option is you can simplify it, or the third option is you can just refer to this one and then just use this piece as a reference. Because if I were to actually paint the photo just now, it would be too much work, too many details. So there's actually a lot of simplifications involved. Like the trees, I actually just retain like this part here, and then only a few trees here that I used for the process. Okay, so now let's get started. So the first thing that we usually do is to introduce a canvas. So in order to introduce the canvas, you can use the canvas that I've included into the brush pack. And today I'll actually be using the brown one. So which one do we actually use most of the time? You actually use the one that is the closest color to your middle ground. So for example, if I'm painting portraits, I will usually use the red one because red is very close to the middle ground of my portraits. But today, the colors that I will be painting mostly resides in brown, so I will be using this one. So once I've imported them in, I usually just rotate it and then fit the canvas, and then voila, there you go. You have your canvas ready. Just set up the reference, settings, canvas, reference, import an image. I'm just gonna import the painting because I'm demonstrating the painting today. Okay. So this is the canvas that I have, and this is the painting that we are doing today. And I need this to be in the middle ground. So that means I want this to be in the same value as my middle ground. So my middle ground mostly have this value, and this value. So what the value that we are looking for is this one. Also this one is the same one. So right now our canvas is too bright. So let's just adjust it using hue and then adjust the brightness to match it. Okay, so now when we have matched it, our work later on is going to be way simpler because this is our like guide when we are painting the base painting. So once you're done, you have your canvas ready already, and then we are going to start the base painting. So for the base painting, the flow goes like this. We actually work on the shadows as the first layer, then the mid-tone, then the highlights. And the canvas is actually whatever's left. Okay, so let me show you an example. This is the example I've made. You can see here we have a lot of layers. So just ignore all the ones that has the arrow. The arrows are all color layers, and the arrow is there because it's a clipping mask. So you can see that they are all numbered. So if you turn on the first one, this is the black layer. And if you see here, they are pretty accurate, meaning this layer sits right on top. So it needs to be the most accurate layer that you're going to do. You're going to work on the most difficult part of the process first, which is the blacks. And the reason why it's the most difficult part of the process because it's going to be the most precise one. So the second layer is going to be the shadows, and if you look, it's right below the black layer. And you don't have to be that precise because you can color over the areas where the black were, you see. You don't have to be precise at all. So the higher level your layers are, the more precise you've got to be, okay? So basically black first, then the shadows, and then after that we would just put in our highlight. And then after that we would put in the whites. So the whites goes here. So once you have something like this, all that's left is the background, which is the mid-tone. So you don't have to paint the mid-tone at all because the background has already done the job for you. So the first thing that we want to do is to sketch the painting, right? So you can just insert the landscape photo that you want into your artwork. Okay, and then just make sure it's above the canvas and lower the opacity. Okay, just make a new layer on top of your reference and pick a color that is different from your reference so that you can see it clearly. So to start sketching, scroll all the way down to the brush pack and use the natural sketch and smudge brush. So this brush is really good for sketching, and you can just lay out the shapes of the artwork first, and also you can just slightly indicate like where the lines are, where the shadows are. So it's important to note that you do not tilt your brush and shade in this layer. You just want like very simple sketch that you can keep referring to after you are done with it. So once you're done, you're gonna have something like this. And turning the reference off, you're going to see something like this as well. Then we're going to start the base painting. So below the sketch layer, make a new layer and then name it shadows. And then it's also good to like give it a number so that you know where you are right now. You don't really have to worry about colors at the moment, just values. So just pick any dark color you see in your palette. So the first rule of this base painting workflow is to paint, not color or sketch or draw. You are painting. So for example, you do not do something like this. This is what you don't want. You are going to be painting so that you can mimic like the realism of oil painting. The way to do that is to use the dry square brush or the rig brush. So I like to use the dry square brush. So what I usually do is I test it out first and see if it's the correct orientation. So this seems to be the wrong orientation because it's supposed to be thick like this. It really depends on the way your canvas is rotated. So if you feel that it's the wrong orientation and the strokes are not like streaky like this, you can just adjust it in the brush settings, go to shape, scroll down a little bit, and then this one just rotate back to 0. So you can just experiment between 0 and 90 and pick one that you use depending on the orientation of your canvas. So this is correct. Now just adjust the size a little bit, and then let's start working on the background. So what I like to do is I just roughly plot in and paint in the shapes of the shadows like so. So just roughly lay out a shape like this first, and once you have this shape, go to your eraser and load the rig brush in, and then increase the size a little bit, and then just carve out the shape a little bit. Okay. Just carve the shape to be more accurate to the painting. So this is like a paint and carve technique. You can also increase the size of the brush to introduce textures like this. So it's quite versatile to work this way. So this is how you get like one shape done. Okay, so just paint it and then carve it. Sometimes you have to erase one time and then paint again like this and carve it again. The first layer usually takes the longest because you have to be the most precise, right? But after that, it gets easier. So this layer, you're actually targeting the blackest of the blacks. So don't worry about other parts of the shadows for now. Now I'm going to increase the size here and give it some straight texture to simulate like grass. You're going to end up with something like this for now. So the next thing we want to do is to load the fan smudge brush in the eraser. Okay. So we're going to put in some branches and highlights. Just use it to erase the highlights out. So what you will get after erasing is the background color. So take your time with this layer and make sure to be like really precise. You can also clean up the edges here if they are not sharp enough. You can also paint with the fan smudge tool to get lines. So it gives like really irregular lines, and this is what we want because we want some unpredictability in our artwork. Because that's what painting is all about. It's not very precise. So once you're done with the blacks, you're gonna have something like this. So it's just gonna be a dark color and pretty precise, like you can almost roughly see the details already. So after that, we are going to put in the second shadow. So for the second shadow, just take some time and find a good color first. You want something that really matches like the color of your background and your shadow. So it should like match. Like this is maybe too red and too vibrant. So I'm just going to push it here a little bit and here. Yeah, so this is like a good shadow color. So we can use this to plot in the shadows. So your shadow layer is going to be below the black, okay, and it's going to be lighter than your shadow and darker than your canvas. Okay, just make sure of that. And for this one, it's really easy to do. You can just fill it in first and avoid those parts that is not of the same value. So I will go here. And then once you have a shape, just carve it out again with the rig brush. You can enlarge it to put some textures. If you find that you can't tell the values apart, this is what you can do. Load the image that you are painting and referencing from, like for example this one or a photo, and go to hue saturation and turn down the saturation to 0. So this way, if you load this into your reference, you'll be able to see the tones clearer, and then everything will be perfect, okay? But if you can identify the values from the colors, it's fine, you don't have to do it. Trust me, it's only difficult to lay in like the blackers, because once you are done with that, this part is usually quite fun because it's like easy to paint. a shape already. Just going to carve it. Make sure that when you're doing the base painting, you're actually like modeling the artwork, like everything looks 3D. I'm just going to switch to my fan smudge brush in my eraser to do the details. Okay, I'm just gonna lay in some holes because the holes are like the skylight from between the leaves. So it doesn't have to be very perfect, and having textures is a good thing. If you find that after erasing you need to do some edits, you can actually go to the smudge tool and load in the fan smudge to do some editing, or the rake brush to do some editing. So if you look here, in certain areas there are a lot of textures, like here. There's a lot of textures. So you can introduce those textures using various techniques. So there is a wet grunge brush. So you can just try first. If you don't like this texture, you can try another one, which is a texture brush. And it looks like that. And another option is also the very dry paint and smudge. You can use this as a brush and you get something like this. So we have this texture, and this texture for like abstract areas. So just play around and pick one. I'm gonna pick the wet grunge one. This kind of smudge whatever you have currently as well. So it looks kind of organic. Yeah. You would actually want to load that into the brush tool. So you can see that the blacks are done and the shadows is done, and I've already also erased the areas where the highlights should be. So your work is going to be cut down exponentially with each layer that you complete, and it's going to get easier and easier. So the next layer to do is the highlights layer. So just put it below the shadows and name it highlights. And for this layer, we want it to be bright but not white yet. Okay, so let's just go to the palette and push it. So it needs to be brighter than the canvas. So let's just try it first. Okay, this is definitely brighter than the canvas, but too bright, maybe like this. Yeah, I think this is a good value, but it's too red. So it seems like this canvas color we are getting more and more yellow the lighter we go. Okay, so this is good. I think it's still too bright. Okay, this is good. So just adjust a little bit and then start painting. Dry skip my brush. Okay, I'm actually going to just drop in the color and then erase away the parts where I think it's too bright. I think it's quicker that way. So grab my eraser, adjust the size, and then let me just erase those parts that shouldn't have this highlight color. Having the canvas tweak to be a mid-tone color is very convenient this way, because you can actually just preview the values like this. Try not to keep all your highlights in the lines. Okay, I'm pretty sure this is not the highlight. So this process can't really be taught. You need to like work on this with experience to gain like the understanding of the tonal values. And let's make sure that the background is not in the highlights color as well. So once you're done, you're gonna have something like this, and this would actually represent the highlights. So after you are done with the highlights, you want to just quickly note down the white areas. So in order to note down the white parts, it's good to have it in a layer above everything else. So now we have blacks, shadows, and highlights. So just make a layer above all that. Okay, and then now we can just note in the whites. Yeah, so I always say that we should split our process and not solve too many problems at the same time. Like right now, we are actually just solving values and drawing, so just 2 problems. So it's easier that way. You don't try to take on too many problems at the same time. And then you get to really pinpoint the mistakes that you're making. Like, is it drawing? Is it modeling? Is it values? Okay. So this is also the layer that you will put in most of the details. So just head over to the fan smudge and draw in all the lines that you need to draw. So this is why this layer has to be right on top, because we are actually working with a lot of detail here. Be very careful about putting whites in very dark areas. You can see that the contrast is too high, and the moment you look at the painting, your eyes is driven there, which means that it's best to just remove it. Now I'm going to make another layer right below everything. So 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 2 layers of whites. Okay. And in this layer, I'm going to use the dry square brush and paint in more highlights. So this is convenient because I get to like use whatever I have from before and add on there. And then I'm taking advantage of all the other shapes that are above it. So now I see that I want the white to be here, but it's being covered by the highlights layer. So I actually want this gone. So what I can do is I can just lift this layer up, and there we have it. So you can just use the layers to advantage like that. And then of course this area as well, that's a bit of white. So you can continue to add white this way, manipulating the layers and making sure that they are all sitting where they should sit. But the main key thing to understand from this is that you need to be very precise with your first layer, less and less as you go on. So once you're done, you're gonna have something like this, and this is the end of today's tutorials. And tomorrow we'll be putting down the colors and also adding the final details before we go into impasto effects. So I'll see you tomorrow. Remember to comment down below if you have any questions, and also let me know how I did with this tutorial. I know that some of you has been asking if I could include like layers and brushes that I'm using. So today I've tried to be very detailed regarding that. Let me know what else I should share, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!